My parents forced me to drain my entire bank account to pay for my sister's medical bills while she lay in a coma for 6 months. I sacrificed everything silently. A year later, after losing my job, they mocked me relentlessly, calling me lazy, while my sister laughed in my face. I felt invisible, humiliated, and forgotten. Until one evening, a single letter arrived in our family mailbox. What happened next left them all in shock. My name is Lily, and for most of my life, I believed sacrifice was the purest form of love. I believed that if I gave enough, endured enough, and stayed quiet long enough, my family would eventually see me. I thought patience was strength, and silence was maturity. That belief shaped my decisions, guided my behavior, and taught me to shrink myself for the comfort of others. In the end, that belief almost destroyed me. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a modest 2-story house with beige siding and a cracked driveway my father promised every year to fix. Winters were harsh, summers sticky, and the walls of our home always seemed to echo with Amanda's voice more than mine. My parents, Richard and Evelyn Moore, raised 2 daughters under that roof. My older sister, Amanda, was always the sun in our household. Everything revolved around her moods, her dreams, her needs. I learned early how to orbit quietly, careful not to cast a shadow or demand warmth meant for her. Amanda was brilliant, they said. Fragile, they said. Special. I was dependable. Reliable. The one who didn't complain. Those words followed me into adulthood like invisible chains. Teachers praised Amanda's potential. Relatives asked about Amanda's future. I learned that love came easiest when I asked for nothing. Even as a child, I folded myself into corners, convincing myself that being unnoticed was the same as being valued. After college, I took a job as an office assistant at a small logistics firm downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it paid well enough. I answered phones, scheduled meetings, organized files, and stayed late without being asked. I saved carefully. I didn't date much. I didn't travel. I didn't spend impulsively. While others upgraded phones and wardrobes, I packed lunches and tracked expenses. By 31, I had built a solid savings account, something I was quietly proud of. It represented safety, independence, and choices. I never told my parents how much was in it. That turned out to be my first mistake. Everything changed the night Amanda collapsed. She had been driving home from dinner when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into the side of her car. The call came at 2:14 a.m. My mother's voice was unrecognizable, raw and broken, barely forming words. Amanda was in a coma. Severe head trauma. Doctors said the first 72 hours would decide everything. I remember standing in my kitchen in the dark, phone pressed to my ear, feeling the world tilt under my feet. I sat in the hospital waiting room for 6 days straight. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, never dimming. I slept curled in a plastic chair, my neck stiff and aching. I ate vending machine crackers and drank bitter coffee from paper cups. I watched my parents age years in a week, their faces hollow, movements frantic. Every decision revolved around Amanda's care. Specialists. Experimental treatments. Private nurses. My name was never called unless someone needed something. On the 7th day, my father pulled me aside near the elevators. His shoulders sagged in a way I had never seen before. "We need help," he said quietly, eyes avoiding mine. "The insurance isn't covering everything." I nodded without thinking, instinctively bracing myself. "How much?" He hesitated, rubbing his temples. My mother joined us, her eyes swollen, mascara smudged. "Lily," she said, gripping my hands tightly. "You have savings. We know you do. You don't have children. You don't have responsibilities like Amanda did. This is family." That was the first time they asked, and I didn't hesitate to say yes. Over the next 6 months, they asked again and again. Every new complication came with a new bill. Every medical meeting ended with my parents looking at me expectantly, their silence heavier than words. I wired money. I wrote checks. I transferred funds late at night, staring at shrinking balances. I drained accounts I had built over a decade, convincing myself that money could be rebuilt, but family could not. When my balance hit zero, my father hugged me and called me a blessing. My mother cried and said God would reward me. Amanda lay motionless, machines breathing for her, unaware of what I had given up. I told myself it didn't matter. She was alive. That was enough. By the time Amanda finally woke up, 6 months later, I was financially hollowed out. My savings were gone. My emergency fund was gone. The quiet sense of security I had carried like armor was gone. I felt exposed in ways I couldn't explain. But I told myself it was worth it. My sister was alive. Recovery was slow, but Amanda improved steadily. Physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. She moved back into my parents' house, into her old room that still held trophies and framed certificates. I visited often, cooking meals, driving her to appointments, sitting through endless stories about how hard her life had been, how unfair everything felt to her. No one ever asked how I was doing. A year after Amanda came home, my company downsized. I was called into a conference room with neutral walls and stale air and handed a folder. Position eliminated. Severance minimal. Health insurance ending. The manager's apology sounded rehearsed, distant. I walked out with a cardboard box and a smile that didn't reach my eyes, my badge still warm in my palm. I applied everywhere. Offices, clinics, schools. I tailored resumes. I practiced interviews in the mirror. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. Rejections piled up quietly in my inbox, polite and final. Days blurred together, heavy with uncertainty. My parents' patience wore thin quickly. Still no job? My father asked one evening, shaking his head as if disappointed rather than concerned. You need to try harder, my mother added. People don't respect laziness. Amanda laughed from the couch. Maybe if you smiled more in interviews. They forgot the money. They forgot the sacrifices. They forgot who had emptied her future to save Amanda's present. I swallowed every word, every insult, every sideways glance. Weeks turned into months. Their comments sharpened, becoming casual cruelty. Look for a job and stop being lazy, Amanda said one afternoon, laughing as if it were a harmless joke. I swallowed my humiliation and nodded. I reminded myself that storms passed, that endurance had always been my strength. Then one evening, as I checked the family mailbox out of habit, I saw a thick envelope addressed to me. Official. Cream-colored. My name typed neatly across the front. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, unaware that everything I believed about sacrifice, silence, and family was about to change forever. I opened the envelope at the kitchen table while my parents watched television and Amanda scrolled on her phone, laughing softly at something on her screen. The house smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant wipes, the kind of ordinary evening that usually passed without meaning. The return address read, simply, Hartwell and Price Legal Group. The weight of the envelope felt wrong in my hands, heavier than paper should feel, as though it carried more than ink and signatures. Inside was a letter that made my fingers tremble as I unfolded it, my breath growing shallow with every line I read. It informed me that I was the sole beneficiary of a trust established by my late grandmother, Eleanor Moore. A trust that had matured 1 month earlier. A trust valued at just over $3.4 million. The words sat on the page, formal and precise, written with the calm authority of law, as if they were not capable of detonating an entire life. My vision blurred slightly, and I had to blink several times to keep the letters from swimming. I reread the letter again and again, certain I had misunderstood something important, convinced there must be a clause I had skipped or a mistake buried somewhere in the legal language. My grandmother had passed away 5 years earlier, quietly, in her sleep, with no drama and no long goodbyes. My parents had told me everything she left behind was divided evenly, modest, nothing life-changing. They had said there was no inheritance worth mentioning, no assets significant enough to discuss. I had believed them without question, because questioning my parents had never been something I was encouraged to do. The letter said otherwise. The trust had been structured privately, beyond probate, beyond family oversight, and beyond the reach of persuasion or guilt. It included diversified investment accounts, 2 small property interests in Indiana, and dividends accumulated steadily over years. It named me alone. Not my parents. Not Amanda. There were no conditions requiring me to share, no clauses granting oversight or consultation. It was complete. Absolute. Final. I sat there in silence, my heartbeat roaring in my ears so loudly it drowned out the television and the faint hum of the refrigerator. My hands felt numb, as though they no longer belonged to me. I pressed them flat against the table, grounding myself, afraid that if I moved too suddenly I might shatter the moment or wake from it and discover it was nothing more than a cruel fantasy. My grandmother had always watched quietly, the way I did. She had seen the favoritism without commenting on it directly, had noticed the way conversations shifted whenever Amanda entered a room. She had seen me bring groceries without being asked, pay bills silently, take care of things no one else noticed or wanted to handle. She had seen me give until I had nothing left and still say thank you, still apologize for existing. She had seen what no one else bothered to notice, and somehow, she had remembered. I didn't tell them that night. I folded the letter carefully, smoothing the creases with shaking fingers, and slipped it back into the envelope. I excused myself early, claiming a headache, and retreated to my room. I lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory I had with my grandmother. Her small smiles when she thought no one was watching. Her long pauses before speaking, as if she were weighing truths carefully. Her habit of holding my hand just a little longer than necessary, as though she wanted me to know something she never said aloud. Over the next weeks, I met with attorneys in quiet offices with glass walls and neutral artwork meant to calm anxious clients. I learned the truth piece by piece, each revelation settling into place like parts of a puzzle I had never known existed. My grandmother had deliberately bypassed my parents after witnessing how they treated me during family gatherings and holidays. She had consulted lawyers long before her death, determined that her assets would not become tools of manipulation or control. The trust had been designed to activate only after Amanda's recovery, ensuring no one could pressure me into using it for medical emergencies, emotional leverage, or guilt-driven demands. I felt grief, gratitude, and fury all at once. Grief for the years I struggled alone, believing my suffering was invisible. Gratitude for finally being seen, even if it came from someone no longer alive. Fury for the lies I had been told, and for how easily my loyalty had been exploited. I stayed jobless publicly. I let the comments continue without defending myself. I let them believe I was failing, drifting, losing momentum. I let them think what they wanted, because for the first time, their opinions could no longer touch the foundation beneath my feet. Still unemployed? My father scoffed one morning, barely looking up from his newspaper, his tone sharp with disappointment. Amanda smirked from the kitchen counter. Maybe you should have saved money instead of relying on luck. I nodded quietly, swallowing my response. Silence had become a shield, not a weakness. Each insult slid past me, no longer cutting as deeply as before. Behind the scenes, I moved carefully and deliberately. I paid off lingering debts I had carried since draining my savings, watching balances disappear with a sense of calm instead of fear. I set up conservative investment strategies and emergency reserves, prioritizing stability over indulgence. I purchased a small townhouse under an LLC, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention or suspicion. I volunteered at a local community center, rebuilt professional connections, and waited. Patience, once forced on me, became a choice I wielded intentionally. Then I invited my family to dinner. I cooked their favorite meals, dishes tied to nostalgia and comfort, the kind that made people lower their defenses. I set the table neatly, using cloth napkins and candles I had saved for special occasions. The atmosphere was warm, disarming, almost celebratory. They relaxed. They laughed. For a moment, it felt like nothing had ever been wrong. Halfway through dessert, while plates still held crumbs and forks rested loosely in their hands, I placed a thick folder on the table. "What's this?" my mother asked, suspicion flickering briefly across her face before she masked it with a polite smile. I smiled gently. "Just something I wanted to share." They opened it together. The shock was immediate and unmistakable. My father's face drained of color, his jaw tightening as he scanned the pages, disbelief quickly giving way to anger. My mother's hands began to shake, the papers rustling audibly as tears filled her eyes. Amanda stared, mouth open, eyes darting back and forth, reading the numbers over and over as if repetition might change them. "You knew," my mother whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of realization. "Yes," I said calmly. "For months." My father pushed his chair back and stood abruptly, the legs scraping against the floor. "You let us think you were struggling," he accused, his voice rising. "I was struggling," I replied evenly. "Just not in the way you assumed." Amanda's voice rose next, sharp and indignant. "You could have helped us. You could have helped me." "I already did," I said softly. "I emptied my future for your past." The words settled into the room like dust after a collapse. Silence fell heavy and suffocating, pressing in from all sides. "I won't be supporting this household," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I won't be funding lifestyles built on disrespect. I'm done being your safety net." My mother cried openly, tears streaking her face as regret finally surfaced. My father argued, his voice rising and falling, grasping for authority he no longer had. Amanda raged, accusing me of betrayal, selfishness, and cruelty. I listened without interruption, absorbing their words without letting them take root. When there was nothing left to say, I stood, gathered my things, and left that night without raising my voice. In the months that followed, boundaries replaced guilt. I limited contact. I declined requests framed as emergencies. I found work on my terms, accepting a role that respected my experience and paid fairly. I furnished my townhouse slowly, intentionally, choosing peace over appearances. I slept peacefully for the first time in years, free from fear and obligation. They were shocked, not because I had money, but because I finally chose myself. And that choice changed everything forever. Moral lessons. This story teaches us that true strength isn't measured by how much we give to others, but by knowing when to stand for ourselves. Sacrifice is noble, but it should never come at the cost of your dignity, future, or peace of mind. Life will test your patience, loyalty, and endurance, but it's also giving you the chance to recognize your own worth. Never let anyone take advantage of your kindness, and never forget that choosing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. Protect your dreams, set boundaries, and trust that when you honor yourself, life has a way of rewarding your courage in ways you never imagined.